When FBI Agent Isabella Reigns is assigned to a covert investigation targeting a powerful criminal network, she begins to notice disturbing parallels between the case and the unsolved tragedy that changed her life as a child. As her search for the truth deepens, long-buried memories begin to surface, forcing her to question not only the identity of those she's hunting, but everything she thought she knew about her own past. What begins as a mission for justice soon unravels into a dangerous reckoning decades in the making. The night was quiet, eerily so. The kind of stillness Officer Mark Reigns had come to associate with danger. His cruiser rolled along County Route 17 at a steady pace, headlights cutting through the dark like twin blades. The radio crackled softly with static, dispatch silent for the last half hour. Mark didn't mind. He liked patrols like this. Low. Noise, no drunk drivers, no domestic calls. Just the road, the trees, and the hum of his engine. Then he saw it, barely within view, just before a bend in the road. A flicker of red light pulsed against the tree line. At first, Mark thought it was tail lights, but as he approached, he realized they weren't moving. Hazard lights. A car was pulled off the road, partially concealed by the slope of the ditch. Mark's gut clenched. This stretch of highway was isolated. People didn't stop here without a reason, and rarely a good one. He slowed the cruiser, pulled over, and grabbed his flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness as he stepped onto the gravel. The sedan was still running. The driver's side door hung ajar. "Hello?" Mark called out, his voice firm but calm. "This is Officer Reigns with the County Sheriff's Department. Anyone inside?" A soft sound answered him. Not words. Something smaller, choked, wet, a child's cry. Mark's heart dropped. He rounded the car quickly and froze. A woman was slumped over in the front seat, her body twisted at an unnatural angle, a spreading bloom of dark red staining her pale blouse. Blood streaked her jaw and neck. Her breathing was faint, almost imperceptible. In the passenger seat, a little girl sat clutching her mother's arm. Her cheeks were soaked with tears, hands trembling. She couldn't have been more than 5. Mark immediately keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 27. I've got a female, adult with severe trauma, possible gunshot wound. 1 juvenile female present alive. I'm requesting immediate medical backup. Location is..." He rattled off the coordinates. "I'm transporting both now. No time to wait." He reached into the back seat and grabbed the emergency kit. "Hey, sweetheart," he said gently, kneeling beside the girl. "I'm going to help your mommy, okay? But we have to go to the hospital. I need you to be brave and come with me." The girl didn't answer. Her wide brown eyes flicked up at him, dazed and empty. She didn't resist as he gently pulled her from the seat and wrapped her in a blanket from the trunk. He cradled her in one arm and reached in for the woman with the other, doing his best not to jar her body. Angela Moretti. He'd recognize her name later in the hospital records. At the moment, she was just a woman slipping away. Mark laid her across the back seat, the little girl bundled beside her. He sped toward the hospital with sirens blaring, one hand gripping the wheel, the other squeezing the shoulder mic for updates. Angela faded in and out of consciousness, eyes fluttering. Blood stained the upholstery beneath her. Then, just as they turned onto the highway ramp, she stirred. "Officer," she rasped. Mark leaned back slightly, still driving. "I'm here." "Hang on, you're going to be okay," she coughed, a dry, wet sound that made the little girl flinch. "Please," Angela said, her voice weak but urgent. "Protect her." "I will," Mark promised, not fully understanding. Angela's eyes welled with tears. "They'll come back if they know she's alive." Mark's breath caught. Angela gripped his forearm briefly with what little strength she had left. Her mouth moved again. She whispered something, a name or maybe a phrase, but the sirens drowned it out. Then her hand slipped away. Her chest fell one final time. She was gone. The emergency room was chaos. Medics rushed to receive them as Mark pulled the girl into his arms and ran through the sliding doors. He gave his statement, answered questions numbly, and watched as doctors swarmed Angela's lifeless body. The little girl hadn't said a single word. Hours passed. A nurse finally came over and told him the girl was in stable condition. No physical injuries. No identification had been found. No wallet. No purse. The car was a rental. No known relatives listed. "What's her name?" Mark asked. The nurse shrugged gently. "She hasn't spoken. We're calling her Jane Doe for now." But the girl did have a name. When Mark leaned in later and spoke softly, asking if she knew where she lived, her voice came in a whisper so fragile it barely reached his ears. "Isabella. Just Isabella. No last name." The paperwork took days. Child Protective Services got involved. No relatives were located. No one came forward to claim her. It was as if she and her mother had lived off the grid. Mark didn't sleep much that week. The case bothered him, the ambush, the silence, the expression on that girl's face. He'd seen trauma before, but never something that hollow, like her light had been switched off. He visited her in the pediatric ward every day. She still didn't talk, but eventually she'd hold his hand. That was enough. By the end of the week, Mark filed a petition to adopt her. It wasn't an impulsive decision. He didn't feel like a savior. If anything, it felt like a promise, a silent one, made to Angela Moretti as her blood soaked his uniform. He would protect her. Years passed. Mark did his best to give Isabella a normal life. He transferred to a desk job to be home more. He packed her lunches, attended parent-teacher conferences, helped her with homework. He told her bedtime stories, watched her grow into a quiet, thoughtful child. She never spoke much about that night. He never pressed. Still, Isabella excelled in school. She asked hard questions, especially about justice, about right and wrong, about why people do bad things. At age 16, she told Mark she wanted to become an FBI agent. He smiled at her, masking the chill that ran through his spine. "Then you'll be the best one they've ever seen," he said. And he meant it, even if he knew deep down that one day the past would come knocking. What do you think Angela whispered to Mark in her final moments? And did he make the right choice by adopting Isabella himself, instead of letting Child Protective Services take over? Share your thoughts below. If you were in his position, would you have done the same? Isabella Reigns parked her unmarked Bureau, set in at the mouth of a dim alley on Chicago's south side, and killed the engine. The early March wind whipped between the buildings, rattling a sagging fire escape and carrying the acrid tang of dumpster rot. Yellow evidence lamps glowed in, a staggered path toward a slumped figure still pinned to the cracked brick wall. Crime scene techs moved with practiced economy, cameras clicking, markers being placed. Someone muttered about coffee that tasted like burnt tires, the ordinary chatter of professionals, yet the air felt wrong, colder than it should. Isabella ducked under the fluttering tape, flashed her credentials, and pulled on gloves. The victim, male, mid-30s, wore a charcoal suit that hadn't come off the rack. 2 rounds to the heart, tight grouping 9mm at a glance, no wallet, no phone. Whoever killed him had taken identification, but left the watch. A vintage Omega, wiped clean. She crouched, noting the absence of powder burns. "Shooter stood back," she said, mostly to herself. "Professional spacing, professional exit." Special Agent Theo Malik, her new partner by 3 weeks, knelt beside her. Witness says a black SUV peeled away at 2:15 a.m., no plates. He offered her a sealed evidence bag. "Found this near the curb." Inside sat a brass shell casing polished almost to gold. Isabella turned it so the overhead lamp caught a faint engraving on the rim, a tiny letter, C. Her stomach tightened inexplicably. "Custom load," she murmured. "Someone's leaving signatures." Theo studied her. "You look like you've seen this before. Not this." She stood, eyes drifting to the alley mouth where the city lights glimmered beyond. "But it feels familiar." Familiar? How? She couldn't place it, an echo at the edge of memory, gone when she tried to grasp it. Back at the field office, Isabella spread photos across her desk, crime scene shots, autopsy stills, maps of Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland. She'd asked intelligence support for open source, pulls on execution-style murders over the last 25 years that matched two-shot center mass patterns and vanished IDs. The database spat out dozens, then hundreds, but 8 cases made her pause. 8 men in 4 states spaced every 2 to 3 years. Same wound geometry, same caliber, same missing IDs. 2 shell casings had been recovered. Both bore the engraved. As she pinned the photos to a corkboard in a gentle arc, stepping back to view it whole. The arrangement looked almost ritualistic, a quiet progression toward something unfinished. Theo knocked and leaned in. "You're nesting, partner." She managed a thin smile. "Old habit," he eyed the board. "That's a long run for one contract hitter." "Or one organization," Isabella replied. She tapped the earliest photo. 1998, Cleveland waterfront. Victim was an accountant fronting for a local bookmaker who owed money to bigger sharks. Her finger slid to 2001, Detroit, union bribe, broker. Then 2004, Indianapolis, State House lobbyist laundering campaign funds. And now 2025, Chicago, identity still unknown. Different cities, different jobs, but they all skimmed from someone richer and meaner. Theo exhaled. That someone being this C crew. "If it is a crew," she said, though the certainty in her chest weighed like a stone. She felt it again. That odd, unnameable pull. "I want their financials, real estate, shell." "Sorry. Scratch that. Front businesses, everything." She caught herself. The phrase shell companies felt automatic, generic. There would be nothing generic about whoever orchestrated this. He opened his notepad. "I'll push it through the task force. Depends on the AD." Isabella scooped the photos into a folder. "Let's brief her." Assistant Director Marisol Vega ruled her domain from a corner office of glass and brushed steel, the skyline blazing behind her like stained glass. She listened in silence as Isabella outlined the pattern, slid over the shell casing photos, and proposed a multi-division initiative. Theo handled the timeline. Isabella handled the heat. When they finished, Vega steepled her fingers. 8 linked homicides in 27 years is thin ice for federal bandwidth. "It's 8 we know of," Isabella countered. "Every victim had interstate financial dealings. That triggers federal interest. And whoever engraved that C wants us to know there's design here," Theo added. "Local detectives never shared intel across state lines. We connect the threads. We trigger RICO possibilities." Vega's eyes flicked to Isabella. "Why does this feel personal to you, Agent Reigns?" Isabella kept her posture, neutral. "Because any professional that consistent is escalating or grooming successors, someone needs to shut the door before the body count rises." A long beat. Vega nodded. "I'll authorize a preliminary task force. 4 agents, 1. Analyst limited budget. Proof of scope doubles your manpower." Isabella felt relief and needles of anxiety in equal measure. "Understood. Deliver me a bigger picture," Vega said, tapping the shell casing photo, "and find out what C stands for." She paused, voice softening. "Good work. You two. Stay smart. People who engrave bullets don't bluff." Outside the office, Theo grinned. "Congrats, senior partner. Your board just hired itself." Isabella's smile faltered. "Let's hope we can pay the bill." That night, long after most lights in the bullpen died, Isabella sat alone, scrolling through decades-old homicide files. The harsh glow of the desk lamp etched tired lines around her eyes. She opened a scanned autopsy photo, the 1998 victim. 2 neat holes through the sternum. She flinched, a memory flashing half-formed, red blooming on white cotton, frantic breath laced with metal and fear. No context, just sensation. She squeezed her eyes shut until the image receded. A soft chime signaled a new email. Lab results. On the casing. Metallurgical composition matched a boutique ammunition workshop in New Jersey that catered to private security firms and collectors. The purchaser list was sealed behind dummy corporations. She forwarded it to the analyst with a note, "Peel the onion." She rubbed her temples, trying to dismiss the lingering unease. If this was just another case, why did her pulse race whenever she stared at the photos? Why did the letter C feel less like a clue and more like a bruise pressed by an unseen thumb? A shadow moved at the edge of the cubicle. Mark Reigns, her dad, stood in uniform, cap tucked under his arm. "You're still up," he said quietly. She smiled, masking fatigue. "Bureau never sleeps, remember?" He eyed the bulletin board. "Looks heavy." "It is." She hesitated. "Execution ring, old and careful." Mark's jaw tightened, the faintest flicker. "Careful men are dangerous. Working on making them less so." He placed a thermos on her desk. "Black, 2 sugars." A pause. "Don't lose yourself chasing ghosts, Izzy." She touched his hand. "I won't. Promise." He nodded, but his eyes lingered on the crime scene photos before he left. She watched him go, a whisper of doubt curling in her mind. Mark rarely commented on her cases. Tonight, he looked worried. Outside, the city lights blurred in cold drizzle. Tomorrow, the task force kickoff would spark new leads, new suspects. She should have felt exhilaration. Instead, as she walked to her car, a chill threaded her spine. An echo from a dark road 20 years ago, still whispering through the night. What or who does the letter C stand for, and what is Mark so worried about? Give the video a like and keep watching to find out. Isabella never skipped her evening run. A moving body helped her sort the day's data. She kept to a well-lit loop around the lakefront, phone strapped to her arm, bureau Glock in a waist holster just in case. Tonight, she felt keyed up. New task force chatter. Too many files open on her desktop. Wind stung her eyes. She lengthened her stride. At the 10-minute mark, she sensed it. Footsteps that weren't hers, perfectly timed to her cadence, staying just outside peripheral vision. She slowed, letting the phantom runner overtake. No one passed. Instinct prickled. She pivoted toward a service road that cut behind an abandoned boathouse. Shorter route back to her car. Fewer streetlights, but open sight lines. Halfway along the dark strip, a shape detached from the shadows. A tall man in a hooded jacket, gloved hands low and loose. He closed distance without a word. Isabella's hand dropped to her holster. "Stop. FBI." The man lunged. She sidestepped, drawing as his shoulder slammed into hers. They crashed to asphalt. The gun skittered away. Pain flared through her ribs. He swung a tactical knife. She trapped his wrist, feeling the muscle cord beneath the sleeve. Trained. He tried for a throat cut. She drove a knee into his thigh and rolled. The knife nicked her arm, hot wetness spreading down her sleeve. Adrenaline sharpened her focus. He was heavier, but her leverage held. She twisted his wrist until the knife clattered free, then rammed an elbow into his jaw. A stunned groan. She slipped behind, locked her forearm under his chin, compressed the carotid. 10 seconds. His body sagged. Blue lights washed the scene. A city patrol had responded to an open-line 911 call from her phone, triggered by her double tap. Panic shortcut mid-struggle. Officers cuffed the unconscious man while paramedics cleaned the gash on her arm and secured the knife in an evidence bag. Isabella retrieved her Glock, magazine intact, round-chambered. She swallowed the shake in, her hands. A hit on her, not her case. That meant escalation. At Bureau HQ, the task force bullpen fell silent when she walked in, fresh bandage on her arm, shirt changed, the knife sealed in a box. Assistant Director Vega met her eyes. "You good to debrief?" "I'm good," Isabella said, voice steady. Theo Malik slid a chair out for her in the interview observation room. Through the one-way glass, the attacker sat at a steel table, wrists cuffed to a ring. Mid-40s, shaved head, now bruising where her elbow landed. Calm, almost bored. "ID?" Isabella asked. Fingerprint hit on an old charge. "Vincent DeMarco," Theo said. "Former Army, dishonorably discharged. So-so 5 multiple private security gigs overseas. Last stateside residence unknown. No priors in 15 years. Why would a ghost come after me?" Isabella murmured. "Closest known link," Theo said, "is this." He tapped a photo from Part 2's board, one of the earlier C-marked murders. DeMarco worked personal security for the victim's boss back then. Probably graduated to cleaner work. A tech leaned in. Lab rushed the knife handle. Partial engraving on the pommel. Letter C. Isabella breathed out through her nose. Bring him in. She stepped into the interrogation room alone. No recorder yet. This was rapport. DeMarco's eyes tracked her, surprisingly alert for someone choked unconscious 60 minutes earlier. Mr. DeMarco, she began, seating herself across from him. You attacked a federal agent. That carries life if terror intent is proved. He said nothing. I'd like to understand why you tried to kill me. DeMarco's gaze drifted to the bandage on her arm. Didn't come to talk. But you are talking, she said, which means you're weighing options. Is the fee worth dying in prison? Because that's where we're headed if you stay silent. A slow shrug. Lawyers talk. We'll get there. First, help me with context. She slid a crime scene photo across the table, the freshly murdered man from last night's alley. Recognize him? DeMarco didn't look. A minute passed. Let's try again, she said. His gaze flicked up. You're persistent. I'm alive. That buys me the right. You want names? He said. Too bad I burned the client list. Isabella didn't blink. I don't care about clients. I want the story. A pause. What story? She slid a case file onto the table. Plain manila, no labels. Opening it, she pulled out a glossy crime scene photo, 20 years old, slightly faded. A woman slumped over the steering wheel of a sedan, blood soaked through her white blouse, jaw slack, eyes half-lidded. Angela Moretti. DeMarco's gaze barely brushed the image before snapping away. His jaw clenched. Isabella didn't give him time to deflect. Angela Moretti, rural highway outside Jefferson County. You were there. A long silence stretched between them. How do you know that name? He asked, voice slower now. She leaned forward slightly, her voice a low anchor. Because I'm her daughter. His breath caught, not a gasp, but a visible shift in his posture. He stared at her, searching her face as if seeing it for the first time. You were, he started, then trailed off. No, that can't. Boing. Isabella pulled another photo from the folder, a snapshot cracked at the corners, weathered from years inside a drawer. A woman with dark hair, holding a little girl in her lap on a city bench. She set it down in front of him. DeMarco reached for it reflexively, only to be reminded by the tug of the cuffs that he couldn't. His hands flexed, knuckles pale. He looked down, blinking hard. You were 5, he said quietly. You had this red sweater with a frayed sleeve. Isabella didn't speak. I couldn't do it, he said. You were just a kid crying, clinging to your mom's arm. She tried to shield you, even bleeding out. I looked at you and... He stopped, shaking his head. I'm a killer, not a monster. Isabella studied him. You killed her. Yes. He didn't flinch. She was marked. She ran with information, not mine to question. But you. I remember her. He nodded slowly. Angela. She begged me not to hurt you. Swore she'd give me anything I wanted. I told her it didn't work that way. Then she was running from someone. DeMarco shook his head slightly. Whatever she knew, whatever she was planning to do, it scared someone enough to put a target on her back. That's all I can say. Isabella closed her eyes briefly, the edges of memory flaring. Blood on hands, the sound of her mother's voice, weak and urgent. She never had a chance, did she? Isabella murmured. Isabella looked up, voice hardening. Who ordered the hit? He didn't answer immediately. His eyes drifted toward the mirrored glass, then back to her. You want to know the real story? Talk to your dad. She frowned. He knows more than he told you. He leaned in slightly. He was there before and after. You think you wound up in his arms by accident? Isabella's jaw tightened. He found me at the scene. He saved my life. Yeah, Vin muttered. And then he buried the rest. What does that mean? He shrugged. Means I've said enough for one night. You're lying. I'm still breathing, aren't I? Isabella stared at him, searching his face, but there was nothing more. He wasn't going to give her the name. Not now. Maybe not ever. She stood. I don't need you to confess to Angela's murder. I know you did it. But I need the trail, the people you worked with, anyone who's still alive. DeMarco tilted his head. You want me to flip? I want the truth. He exhaled slowly. I'll think about it, but I want something in return. Witness relocation and immunity for the Moretti case. Isabella's jaw clenched. She didn't answer, just stared at him for a long moment, then walked out. Outside the room, Theo watched. Her approach. Well? He remembered her, and he remembered me. Her voice cracked slightly. He spared me. That night it was him. Theo's eyes widened. Holy hell. He's ready to flip? He wants protection and immunity. He'll give us names. Theo hesitated. Can you live with that? No, Isabella said, but I can live with what comes next. She walked away, not toward her desk, but toward the stairwell, toward the exit. She needed air. The hallway blurred. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew everything had changed. Not just the case, not just the man in the cell, but the foundation of who she was. Isabella kept the line open long enough to hear her father's steady breathing. Only when he repeated her name did she force words out. Give me 15 minutes. She ended the call, changed into a clean blouse, and slid her sidearm into her shoulder holster, more out of habit than need. The bureau parking deck glowed with sodium vapor, empty except for her sedan. Rain had started, thin needles tapping, the windshield as she eased onto Lakeshore Drive, the wipers whispering back and forth. 20 minutes later, she turned onto Burwood Avenue, a quiet street of small bungalows and tidy lawns. Mark Raines's porch light was on, haloing the sagging swing they'd never gotten around to fixing. She killed the engine, letting the rain tick against the roof while she rehearsed what to ask first and how not to sound like an interrogator. The front door opened before she reached the steps. Mark stood in sweats and an old sheriff's department, t-shirt, silver hair flattened on one side from sleep. Deep lines bracketed his mouth. He looked like he'd aged a year in the hours since she'd seen him at HQ. Hey, Izzy? Dad. She felt the steady drum of his heart. He felt the tension still coiled in her shoulders. When they stepped apart, he gestured her inside. The house smelled of pine cleanser and coffee. Framed snapshots of camping trips and science. Fair ribbons lined the hallway, her entire childhood curated in 5x7 borders. Seeing them now felt like discovering props on a movie set. She shrugged off her coat, wincing as the bandage on her arm tugged. Mark noticed. You should be resting. I need answers more. He nodded, resigned, and led her to the kitchen. Steam drifted from two mismatched mugs. Isabella wrapped her hands around one, letting the heat ground her. Mark sat opposite, fingers interlaced, knuckles white. Tell me everything you know about Mom's death, she said. No preamble, he inhaled slowly. I already gave my statement back then. That's the report, she said. I want the truth. Mark's gaze dropped to the tabletop as if the grain held a script. Angela was alive when I got her. To County General, barely. She understood it was bad. She said they'd keep hunting you unless they thought you were dead. Then she, grabbed my collar, begged me to keep you safe. His voice hitched. I promised I would, and afterward I waited for homicide to pick up the case, but they wrote it off as a robbery gone bad. It wasn't. Placement of the wounds, wipe prints, rental car paid in cash. Too clean. So you started poking around. He gave a tired, half smile. Couldn't let it go. I called in favors, dug through DMV and hotel records. Angela had been living off the grid for weeks. Fake names, cash motels. That told me she was scared of someone who could track official IDs, somebody with reach, someone powerful. Isabella echoed the words Vin had used. Someone powerful. Mark rubbed his temples. Everything I turned up found a dead end. Whoever hired the shooter covered tracks faster than I could follow them. Why not take it federal? She pressed. 'Cause I was already getting phantom calls at the precinct. Hang-ups at 2:00 a.m. Someone knew I was sniffing. I saw a black sedan outside the house 3 nights in a row. Then it vanished. I figured if I drew more attention, you'd be next. You buried it, she said, voice flat, but not accusatory. I thought I was protecting you. Silence filled the kitchen, broken by the ticking wall clock. Isabella set down her mug. I'm not 5 anymore. Show me what you found. Mark hesitated, then stood. It's in the basement. Haven't touched the box in years. She followed him down narrow stairs that creaked under their weight. The basement was half workshop, half storage. Power tools, holiday boxes. Her old training wheels hung like a museum piece. In a locked cabinet sat a single weathered file box. Mark unlocked it, lifted it onto a workbench, and pried off the lid. Inside lay a black leather notebook and a small stack of photographs bound with twine brittle from age. Isabella slipped on latex gloves, another habit, and lifted the first photo. Angela stood in a restaurant doorway, laughing mid-turn, her hand resting on the chest of a tall man. Dark hair, knife-edged cheekbones, a tailored overcoat. He was leaning in, saying something only she could hear. They looked oblivious to the camera flash. Isabella's chest tightened. Who took this? These were your mom's, Mark said. I traced it back to the cabin you used to live in. I was lucky to find these. Someone burned it down just 2 days after. Isabella flipped through more photos. Angela boarding a yacht at night. The same man whispering to a maitre d'. Angela visiting a clinic, hand absent-mindedly on her stomach. Each snapshot felt like stolen time. She opened the leather notebook. Mark's handwriting filled the pages. Names, phone numbers, plate numbers, arrows connecting them into messy webs. One name appeared in bold ink, circled twice. Dominic Caruso. The blood drained from her face. I've seen this name in intel. Briefs. Old organized crime docket. Mark exhaled. That's him. Who is he to Mom? Mark braced his palms on the bench. Angela met Caruso at a charity auction. He presented himself as an import-export entrepreneur. Poured on the charm. She fell hard. 6 months in, she overheard him on a phone call, ordering a murder. She tried to pretend it was business talk, but then she found cash bundles, burner, phones. That scared her straight out the door. He gestured to a photocopied birth certificate. She was already pregnant. Didn't dare tell him. Isabella swallowed. She raised me alone for 5 years. Mark nodded. Then Caruso's. People spotted her in Milwaukee. She grabbed you and ran. She must have thought distance was enough. Isabella pressed a hand to the workbench to steady herself. Photographs blurred. Are you saying Dominic Caruso is my father? Mark's voice cracked. Yes, and he ordered the contract on Angela. The words detonated in her chest. She forced herself to breathe through the ringing in her ears. When she spoke, her voice sounded distant. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because you deserved a life without his shadow. I hoped he'd forget you existed. But the moment you joined the Bureau, I worried the past might find you. Isabella's eyes burned, but no tears came. It found me tonight. Mark's shoulders slumped. I'm sorry. She set the photos down with surgical care. Every joint in her body felt electrified. Pain, betrayal, and something fiercer. Intent. I need to copy everything, she said, nodding at the box. Chain of evidence, full digital scan. Then I need statements from you. Off the record for now. Mark straightened. The lawman in him recognized the cadence. You think you can take him? I don't think, she replied. I know. Upstairs, dawn bled pale light across the living room curtains. Isabella loaded the box into a canvas. Tote. Mark hovered nearby, uncertain. I'm sorry, Izzy, he said. She zipped the tote. I love you, Dad, but I can't promise where this investigation will lead. He nodded, accepting the lines being redrawn. Whatever you need, I'm with you. She brushed a hand along his arm. I understand why you hid the truth, but I have to finish this. He swallowed. Give him hell. She stepped onto the porch. The rain had stopped, leaving the street slick and shimmering. She paused, feeling the weight of the tote strap bite into her shoulder, the weight of inheritance. In the distance, a newspaper truck rattled past, scattering rubber-banded bundles. A new day, headlines unwritten. Isabella squared her shoulders, descended the steps, and slid into her car. As the engine started, she set her jaw. Angela Moretti's story was no longer a cold case. Dominic Caruso had just become an active target, whether he knew it yet or not. She drove toward the bureau with sunrise flaring in the rearview mirror, a silent vow echoing in her mind. Mom, I will finish what you couldn't, and he will never hurt anyone again. The bureau's off-site safe house buzzed with low voices and laptop fans. Isabella sat at a folding table while tech operative Grace Wu scrolled through a forged dossier on the big monitor. Birth certificate, sealed juvenile. Record 3 years of customs fines, enough grit to feel real. Your new name, Grace said, is Lena D'Angelo, Staten Island logistics broker, rumored to move untaxed liquor from Canada. Small enough to need protection, useful enough to court. Isabella adjusted her wig, darker auburn bob, fringe obscuring her brows, and practiced the alias in a flat Queen's accent. Lena, got it. Vincent DeMarco, in shackles but under bureau escort, supplied the final thread. Caruso's Chicago gatekeeper for contraband is Carlo Scud Vitelli. Flash him a good Canadian liquor route and he'll bite. But his top man, Rocco, is the real test, skeptical of new faces. Any verbal code? Isabella asked. Vin nodded. Tell Carlo you're in town to dry the barrels before winter. That's the vet phrase. Theo Malik would run point from the surveillance van. We'll be 3 blocks out. Comms on sub-ear mold, dead switch every half hour. If they sweep, you drop the wire. Isabella pocketed a thumb drive preloaded, with Trojan firmware and rose. Let's get me invited to the party. 2 nights later, Isabella, now Lena, walked into an after-hours butcher shop off Cicero Avenue. The front smelled of bleach and raw meat. In the back freezer, a hidden door opened onto a candlelit card room where 6 men sat around a felt table, chips clinking. Carlo Vitelli, barrel-chested, gold tooth flashing, looked up. You the friend from the island? Isabella set a mason jar of rye on the table. Straight from Fort Covington. Barrels are dry before winter. Recognition flickered in Carlo's eyes. He uncapped the jar, sniffed, then poured a splash into a shot glass. 1 sip, a grunt of approval. Not bad. Who's your supplier? Answer costs, she said. But the lane's quiet. No ports, no stamps. Rocco, lean with wolfish eyes, leaned forward. Quiet lanes make loud coffins if they turn out. Dirty, she met his gaze. Only dirt is the border mud on my tires. A silent beat. Then Carlo laughed, slapped the table. Sit, Lena. Let's talk tariffs. They grilled her for an hour. Routes, contacts, bribe amounts. She spun details from memory and DeMarco's coaching, careful to inject flaws. A missed toll plaza, a crooked customs agent's nickname. Real criminals knew perfection was fake. Finally, Carlo pushed back his chair. That'll do. We move. A test load next week. Rocco will babysit. Rocco's stare promised no favors. 3 days later, Isabella followed Rocco through a warehouse stacked with shipping crates. Her hidden camera, disguised as a shirt button, transmitted serial numbers to Theo's van. Forklifts whined. Diesel fumes hung thick. Rocco stopped beside a locked office. Boss keeps manifests here. If you're legit, nothing in there scares you. He tossed her the key. Inside, bare fluorescent bulbs buzzed. While Rocco watched from the doorway, she opened a file cabinet, leafed through carbon invoices, letting her phone's NFC chip skim data. The Trojan thumb drive slid into a lonely desktop tower beneath the desk. LED blinked once, then darkened. Payload delivered. She made a show of scanning totals. Looks clean, except crate 2204. Weight's off by 70 kilos. Filler or fentanyl? Rocco's brow rose. He hadn't noticed. You tell me. Filler, she said, pushing the file back. If it were fentanyl, your forklift crew would be wearing masks. You don't waste overhead. A grudging smirk. Maybe you're useful. They re-entered the main floor just as a side door banged. Open. and Carlo strode in, flanked by 2 new bodyguards and a gray-haired man in a trim navy coat. Dominic Caruso. Isabella's pulse stuttered, but her face stayed Lena's, curious but unimpressed. Caruso moved with coiled authority, surveying. Crates like chess pieces. Up close he seemed shorter than the myth, yet the room contracted around him. Carlo beckoned Isabella. "Boss, this is Lena D'Angelo, the Canadian lane I told you about." Caruso's eyes swept her features, pausing a shade too long on her cheekbones. Angela's cheekbones. She forced a half-smile. "Mr. Vitelli says you run a tight ship. I like tight ships." Caruso spoke softly. "Tight ships sink slower, but they still sink if the hull's flawed." She met his gaze. "Good thing I patch leaks." He stepped closer, studying the cut on her arm, visible beneath the shirt cuff, remnant from Vin's attack. "Price of business? Jogging accident?" She lied. "Jogging accident." Caruso nodded once. "Rocco will vet you. Background, references. If you pass, we talk volume." His tone made it clear, few people passed. He walked on, issuing orders. Isabella exhaled slowly, only after his footsteps faded. That night, Bureau analysts flagged Caruso's order. Private investigators contracted to dig into Lena D'Angelo. The legend would hold unless Rocco called the real Staten Island Customs office. Grace Wu patched in new fake citations and a voicemail line, but every added layer meant one more seam that could split. At dawn, Isabella met Rocco at a South Chicago dock. Rain misted the river as workers offloaded crates. Rocco handed her a burner. "Until vet's done, this stays on you. Hourly check-ins. Miss one, I assume you flipped." "Paranoid much?" she said, pocketing it. "Still breathing, aren't I?" He echoed Vin's earlier words, a grim coincidence. She spent the day shadowing manifests, logging container numbers for the Bureau. Twice she slipped away long enough to plant coin-sized transmitters on crate pallets. Each pinged Theo's van, mapping the network. By dusk, Carlo threw a cookout behind the warehouse. Beer, cheap grills, men boasting over the hiss of steak fat. Isabella laughed at jokes, took small sips, kept her senses razor-sharp. When Carlo wandered off, Rocco leaned close. "Boss likes you, I don't." "Noted," she said. "You know why? Because I read your ledger better than you. Because you smell like law." He flicked his cigarette to the ground. "But I can't prove it yet." She held his gaze. "Then stop sniffing and start counting profit." He smiled thinly. "Background will tell." 2 mornings later, Grace Wu called, Isabella's secure line. "Heads up, their PI hit the Staten Island alias harder. Photo request from DMV. We fed them a college yearbook shot of your doppelganger. Might hold, might not." At the warehouse, tensions crackled. Workers whispered about an internal leak. Carlo's jovial mood soured. He barked at guards to sweep, for bugs. Isabella fought to keep her pulse steady, as handheld detectors passed inches from her planted transmitters. One guard's device chirped faintly at pallet 14. He frowned, repositioned. Nothing. The tag's frequency had hopped away just in time. Caruso arrived unannounced that evening, entering the office where Isabella updated a ledger. He shut the door behind him. "Background's late," he said, eyes unreadable. "That makes me nervous." She set the pen down. "DMV backlogs. Budget cuts. Maybe." He approached, voice almost gentle. "I've learned to trust instincts. Mine say you're familiar." A hum of fear vibrated under her ribs. "I get that a lot. Must be the cheekbones." Caruso's gaze sharpened, as if the word triggered something. He clipped. "Who referred you to Vitelli?" "Friend in Buffalo calls himself Moose. Big beard. Moves whiskey to upstate bars." Caruso studied her another moment, then nodded toward the ledger. "Finish month end. We'll talk routes tomorrow." He left, door thudding shut. Isabella released a breath. Her hands trembled once before she stilled them. The ledger lines blurred. Familiar cheekbones, dangerously close to recognition. She tapped her comm twice. Dead switch check-in. Theo's voice crackled. We got you. Extraction, if you blink. Negative, she whispered. Hold position till I have enough to bury him. Outside, engines revved as Caruso's convoy rolled into the night. But Isabella knew the real engine turning was suspicion. The legend was fraying. She had days, maybe hours before background checks reached beyond paper to blood. Time enough, she promised herself, to finish what Angela Moretti started and prove that even a tight ship can be scuttled from within. 4 days after the warehouse sweep, Theo Malik's voice broke across the task force channel. Package confirmed. Caruso's corps lieutenants. Full cash drop tonight at the North Shore estate. Isabella's pulse leapt. Every transmitter she'd planted had paid off. Routes, ledgers, audio of Carlo Vitelli detailing the next payoff. The U.S. attorney signed arrest warrants at dawn. SWAT and HRT teams rolled in from Quantico by dusk. In the mobile command truck, Assistant Director Vega gave final assignments. Front breach, Alpha Team. Garden access, Bravo. Reigns. She looked at Isabella, armored in Kevlar, eyes clear despite the sleepless nights. You ride, Bravo. Take custody of Caruso if he surfaces on your side. Copy, Isabella said, chamber-checking her sidearm, and snapping the visor down on her helmet. Grace Wu's voice crackled over the TACnet. Interior jammer live in 10. All mansion comms dark. The caravan rolled through the gated drive at midnight. Headlights killed, engines hushed. Spotters signaled clear. Then the night split with synchronized flashbangs. Isabella vaulted the garden wall behind 2 HRT operators. Glass shattered ahead as Bravo team stormed the conservatory. Gunfire barked from the corridor. Plaster dust exploded off the doorway. Isabella returned 2 rounds covering the push. A guard lunged from behind a marble pillar, shotgun raised. She dropped to a knee, fired once, center mass. He crumpled. Another bullet scorched her bicep, grazing through. Kevlar and flesh, pain-seared. But she kept forward momentum. Carlo Vitelli burst from a side hall, spraying wild rounds. Theo, on her comm, called positions. Isabella flanked right, clipped Carlo's thigh. He spun, slammed into a statue, dropped his weapon. Hands, she barked. He complied, whimpering. A SWAT agent cuffed him. Isabella pressed on, adrenaline drowning the burn in her arm. At the grand staircase, 2 bodyguards dragged Dominic Caruso toward a hidden elevator panel. Isabella broke cover, shouting, Federal agents, drop it! 1 guard spun, fired, she ducked. The round ricocheted off wrought iron. She double-tapped, 1 shot to the shoulder, 1 to the leg. He collapsed. The remaining guard froze, weapon half raised. Dominic shoved him aside. Whether to run or fight wasn't clear. Then he found Isabella blocking the landing, muzzle leveled at his chest. His gray eyes narrowed. You, he growled, recognition dawning from that warehouse office. Federal custody, hands where I can see them. Instead, he reached for the fallen guard's pistol. Isabella fired once, a warning shot into the banister. Splinters flew. Dominic stopped. She closed distance, wrenched his wrist, spun him against the railing, and snapped cuffs onto his wrists with a zip tie's finality. Sirens wailed outside as agents secured the last rooms. Dominic's empire, decades in the making, collapsed in under 6 minutes. At headquarters, medical patched Isabella's arm while Dominic sat shackled to a steel table. He watched her through the glass, expression unreadable. Theo approached. You sure you want first crack? We can let a neutral do the opener. I need his words on record. Theo nodded, set the recorder on standby, and stepped out. Isabella entered, minus body armor, but still in blood-flecked tactical blacks. She placed a manila envelope on the table and clicked the recorder. Time 0130. Special Agent Isabella Reigns interviewing Dominic Caruso. Dominic smirked. She ignored the bait. You oversee a trafficking and murder conspiracy across 4 states. Evidence includes ledgers, wire intercepts, eyewitness testimony from Carlo Vitelli and Vincent DeMarco. Do you wish to cooperate? He leaned back, chains clinking. Power changes hands every decade. Cut one head, another grows. You know that. Maybe, she said. But tonight you're the one in cuffs. His gaze slid to the envelope. What's that, my eulogy? Slowly, she pulled out a single 8x10 photograph, Angela Moretti laughing at the restaurant doorway. She said it before him. The smugness drained from his face. Finger muscles twitched as if reaching for a memory. Where did you get this? Answer my questions. Dominic's voice dropped to a whisper. She was the love of my life. Isabella's throat tightened, but she held the line. Then why did you have her killed? His jaw worked. She ran. She stole information. I couldn't let that leak. My people handled it clean. No witnesses. He shrugged weakly. Cost of loyalty. Did you know she was pregnant when? She left? Isabella asked. Confusion wrinkled his brow. No. She drew a breath that felt like stepping off a ledge. This woman is my mother. Dominic stared, slack-jawed. That's not possible, she never told me. I was told the job was finished, no loose ends. She leaned in, voice razor quiet. Well, they lied. He blinked, processing the fracture in his world. Isabella, he said, the name tasting, unfamiliar on his tongue. She once said if she ever had a daughter, she'd choose a saint's name. Isabella's nails dug crescents into her palm. Don't you dare speak about what she wanted. You took every choice from her. She straightened. Cooperate, or spend what life you have left in a concrete box. He stared at the photo. Grief, disbelief, and dawning horror merging. If I talk, you protect what's left of the family. You mean your lieutenants who'll slit your throat the moment you flip? She slid a cooperation agreement across the table. Names, accounts, burial sites, every order you ever gave. Dominic's shoulders sagged. I'll need counsel. You'll get one. She clicked the pen, set it beside the paper, and rose. Your legacy ends here, Dominic. She killed the recorder and walked out, pulse hammering but steady. 3 months after the takedown, the federal courtroom was standing room only. Reporters packed the gallery. Victims' families lined the benches. The nation had followed every twist of the case, from the undercover leak to the unmasking of Dominic Caruso, the aging crime boss who had eluded law enforcement for decades. Isabella sat in the front row, her badge tucked out of sight. This wasn't about the Bureau today. This was personal. Judge Harold read the sentence without flair or delay. Dominic Angelo Caruso, this court finds you guilty on all counts, including conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and interstate trafficking. You are hereby sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Caruso, flanked by U.S. Marshals, stood motionless. His face betrayed no emotion. The same couldn't be said for the men seated behind him, his lieutenants. They exchanged glances of resignation. Their power had evaporated the moment the courtroom doors closed. Isabella didn't look at them. Her gaze remained on Caruso until the judge called for them to be removed. As the courtroom emptied, Theo approached and rested a hand on her shoulder. It's over, he said. Isabella gave a small nod. At least the part the world can see. 2 weeks later, a manila envelope arrived at Bureau headquarters marked, Special Agent Isabella Reigns, confidential. The return address bore the seal of a remote federal witness protection facility. Inside, a single folded note in tight, angular handwriting. Isabella, I don't know if this will help you sleep. Probably not. But I need you to know. I remembered your face every day since that night. I saw your eyes when I pulled the trigger. That's why I didn't pull it twice. I followed orders for years, convinced it was just business. But sparing. You was the first time I disobeyed and the only time I did something right. I'm sorry. Then Isabella read it once. Then again. She didn't cry. She didn't speak, but she folded it carefully and placed it into her personal lockbox alongside her mother's photo, the original case folder, and the red sweater sleeve she'd kept all those years without knowing why. The next morning, a bureau contact quietly confirmed what she already suspected. Vincent DeMarco had died in his sleep. No foul play, no goodbyes, just the end of a man who'd spent his last years living with memory as punishment. Mark Raines stood at the edge of the pier behind the precinct, hands in his coat pockets, staring out over the river. Isabella approached, quietly, pausing beside him. They stood without speaking, the wind ruffling the edges of their jackets. Mark turned slightly. "I saw the sentencing on the news," she nodded. "It's done." They stood in silence again. Then, without needing a word, Isabella stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Mark, who had braved shootouts and buried friends, didn't move at first. Then he held her tight, steady, like he had the night he brought her home as a child. No speech, no explanations, just the truth between them. The headstone hadn't changed in 20 years. It read, Angela Moretti, 1976-2005. Beloved mother, always loved, never forgotten. Isabella knelt in front of it, a bouquet of white lilies cradled in one arm. The soil was soft beneath her knees. Mark stood a respectful distance away, letting her have the moment. She brushed leaves off the stone, gently cleaned the carved letters with her fingertips. For so long, she had imagined this moment would come with tears, or maybe an apology she didn't know how to give. But now, words came easily. "You were right to run," she whispered. "He would have destroyed both of us. But you gave me a chance at something better. You gave me to someone who protected me, until I could protect myself." She looked over, her shoulder. Mark remained a quiet sentinel by the gravel path, his arms folded, eyes low. "I never told you," she continued, "but he's the only dad I'll ever have." Isabella set the lilies against the base of the stone and stood slowly. The wind picked up, sweeping through the cemetery trees and tugging strands of her hair into her face. Mark stepped forward, stopping beside her. "You okay?" "Yeah." They stood together for a long moment, watching the wind rustle the petals. As they turned to leave, Isabella cast one last glance back at the headstone. She didn't speak out, loud this time, but the words were clear in her mind. "Rest in peace, Mom. I finished what you couldn't have." The air felt lighter somehow, not free of pain, but clear, honest. They walked back toward the car in silence, side by side, two people, bound not by blood but by truth. And in that quiet space between grief and closure, Isabella knew she would carry both of their names with her. The woman who gave her life and the man who taught her how to live it. Thanks for sticking with the story until the end. If you enjoyed, give this a like and share if you haven't already, and subscribe for more.